For my book report, I chose the book titled Peak. This book was written by Roland Smith, who was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. At a young age, he was given an old typewriter. He didn't know how to spell, and he barely knew how to read, but he loved the sound and the look of the letters on the crisp white paper. This undoubtedly sowed the seed in his writing career. Roland worked in the zoo for 20 years, where he would write about animals. He and his wife now live on a small farm where he spends most of his days writing. He travels to visit schools and to do research for his upcoming books. This novel is about a 14-year-old boy named Peak Marcello. Not Pete, Peak, P-E-A-K, like Mountain Peak. It could have been worse. His parents could have named him Glacier, Abyss, or even Crampon. Peak lives in New York with his mom Terry, stepdad Rolf, and twin sisters Patrice and Paula. Peak and his sisters go to a school for gifted children. Peak was their gifted writer, even though he much rather have been their climber. The novel starts with Peak being arrested for climbing and tagging a skyscraper in New York. The blue mountains that he tagged were small, but he made up for that by placing them in audacious places. Peak was all over the news and was labeled Spider Boy, Fly Boy, and Gecko Kid. Instead of being locked up in the juvenile detention center, the judge agreed to let Peak live with his biological father in Thailand, sort of like a disappearing act. The decision was easy for Peak. His father was Joshua Woods, the greatest mountain climber in the world. While in Thailand, Peak's father told him that they were going to Kathmandu. His father bought him all the gear that he would need and more. Peak was in heaven. He was going to climb Everest. They left for Kathmandu immediately to join his climbing company, Peak Experience. Zopa, a retired Sherpa, was tasked to help Peak train and ultimately try for the summit of the mountain. He brought his grandson, Sanjo, along, who was the same age as Peak. While on Everest, Peak ran into physical and emotional problems. Through it all, Peak was documented step by step by a film crew and a reporter. Many climbers suffered from acclimatization issues, turned around due to bad weather, or died trying to summit the mountain. To make matters worse, there was a crazy soldier named Shek who wanted Peak and Sanjo off the mountain for being too young. Despite this, Peak and Sanjo supported each other to the very top. In the end, Peak let Sanjo be the youngest summiter because he realized that the only thing you'll find on the summit of Mount Everest is a divine view. The things that really matter lie far below. He then returned to his family in New York right after the climb. Peak is my most favorite character in the novel. He is a very determined, caring, thoughtful, and mature young boy. He adamantly told Zopa, "I am going to make it to the summit." Even though there was friendly competition in the air, Peak not only took care of Sanjo when he fell sick, but also saved his life when he was hanging off a cliff. He also promised his sisters that he would be home in time for their birthdays. When Peak found out that his father had received but never replied to his letters at base camp, he was furious. However, he maturely decided to let bygones be bygones. My favorite chapter of the book is Top of the World, in which Peak is close to the summit. At one point, Peak slipped and was holding on to a rope. Thankfully, he survived, or else the book would have ended there. The colorful player flags all over Everest helped him shift into summit fever. But a few feet away from the top of the mountain, Peak decided to turn around. He knew that the publicity for being the youngest climber in the world would help Sanjo's life drastically. Sanjo was grateful for Peak's act of selflessness and tagged Peak's Blue Mountain on the summit. I highly recommend this book as it's inspiring for readers of all ages. This book is packed with adventure, and climbing Everest was unplanned for, but Peak took on the challenge. Not many other teens his age would have left the comfort of their own couches to explore the outdoors. This novel is also eye-opening and humbling. When Sanjo's father, who was also a Sherpa, died on a mountain, Sanjo became the breadwinner of his family so that his sisters could continue their schooling. Without a formal education, there's no future for girls in Kathmandu. The end.